So mankind has taken a lot of photos. The first photo ever taken was called View from the Window of Le Gras by French inventor Joseph Niepce in 1826. It took 8 hours. Selfies were not invented yet. The oldest known photograph with a person in the shot shows a man in Paris getting his shoes shined in 1838. No, selfies not invented yet either. It's estimated only a few million pictures were taken in the 80 years before the first commercial camera was introduced. Photography became more widespread when the Kodak Brownie was invented in the 1900s. It cost $1 in 1901. Well, they were thinking about selfies then. By 1930, about 1 billion photos were taken a year. In 1960, 3 billion photos were taken a year. It's estimated that in 1960, 55% of photos were of babies. There probably were a few selfies then. By 1970, there were 10 billion photos taken a year. In 1980, there were 25 billion photos taken a year. By 1990, there were 57 billion photos taken a year. In 2000, there were 86 billion photos taken a year. Yes, selfies were invented. Today, we take more than 380 billion photos a year. Every 2 minutes, we take more pictures than the whole of humanity in the 1800s. There are 1 billion photos on Instagram. 300 million photos are uploaded to Facebook every day, probably all selfies. So humans really like taking pictures. One of the things we'll think about in this class, I think, is summed up in a wonderful quote from Dorothea Lange. Many of you know Dorothea Lange, the renowned documentary photographer, lived in Berkeley. She lived up in Euclid Street and did, of course, the amazing photographs of the Great Depression during the Farm Security Administration era. We'll talk about that. Dorothea Lange said, "This benefit of seeing can only come if you pause a while, extricate yourself from the maddening mob of quick impressions ceaselessly battering our lives, and look thoughtfully at a quiet image. The viewer must be willing to pause, to look, again, to meditate." So we will, in this class, look at some of the iconic photographers of the 20th century, photographers like Dorothea Lange, Cartier-Bresson, William Eggleston, Lewis Hine, Helen Levitt, Robert Frank, and others, photographers whose names you may or may not recognize, but whose work you have seen, work that has influenced all forms of visual media, including the selfie, work that has influenced advertising, fashion, fine art, and by looking and talking, we will together unravel what to many is a mystery, what makes a great photo, and how do you do it. So I hope you'll join me to explore photography. Thank you.
Thank you.